Welcome in, Irish faithful. This is the voice of college football on Notre Dame. I'm your host, Patrick Brevity, from here on out. And we're going to be talking about the top 5 returning players for the Irish next season. The NFL is going to be poaching some of the players. I believe 7 or 8 of them got invited to the NFL Scouting Combine today. The NIL and transfer portal era are well and alive in college football. So there's a ton of turnover. So when we're talking about the offseason, we're going to take a look at the guys that are going to be returning, the guys that are going to support this team in 2025 that also supported this team in 2024. This list is in no particular order, but to start it off, we got to start off with the undisputed, in my opinion, number one guy, and that is going to be Jeremiah Love, the backfield workhorse for the Irish last season. His 99-yard rush, as we all know, put them into a great position to defeat Indiana in the first round, and he averaged 6.9 yards per carry last season and was overall just a very dominant force for the Irish. This backfield is deep. You got a guy like Jadarian Price right behind him, and it's still going to be Jeremiah Love. That should just show you how good he is. 38% forced missed tackle rate. He had a 91 PFF grade last season, and that was 5th nationally. He's going to return for the Irish, and at times last year when it felt like the passing game couldn't go, Jeremiah Love was that guy. And we noticed later on in the season how much it did affect the offense when he wasn't completely healthy. He's coming back this year, and he's going to be healthy. He's the number one guy, and if there's any player to get some Heisman buzz on this team, obviously separating from looking at a quarterback, it's going to be Jeremiah Love, most dynamic offensive returner on this team. Taking a look at number 2, could arguably be the second best returner just in general as well, but it's going to be Leonard Moore, cornerback, freshman from last year. He was a true freshman, came in as a 3-star prospect, completely outshot that. Okay, he began Notre Dame's as Notre Dame's starting boundary quarter in early October after a preseason All-American. Benjamin Morrison, as we all know, underwent hip surgery, kept that role, and he ended up starting 10 games for the Irish while recording 48 tackles and 2 of them for loss. 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and a team-high 11 pass breakups. This guy was the number one guy on the boundary out there, and he also held opposing signal callers to 58.6 NFL passer rating, and they only completed 45.5% of their passes for 286 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions his way. When they threw his way, it wasn't working, or at least it wasn't working at a high percentage. Marcus Freeman obviously wants him to continue to elevate his game, and next year I don't see why he wouldn't. When we take a look at Benjamin Morrison's campaign in his freshman year, it's pretty much comparable, which is a really, really great sign. In Benjamin Morrison's first year, when quarterbacks threw his way, it was 22 catches, 296 yards, a touchdown on 51 targets in 13 games. More, as I mentioned earlier, 23 for 272 and 2 touchdowns on 52 targets, and that was in one more game. Great stuff, as always. We're going to be seeing him, hopefully, have another spectacular year. And I definitely think that ESPN is completely right for putting him on their first team of their way too early All-American squad. Should be another name to look out for. Next up on the list is going to be Jaden Greathouse. Now, I almost felt like partially that this was going to be maybe not the pick that everybody would think it is, because I think a lot of people are saying, hey, the weak spot on this team is wide receiver. Well, I slightly do think that we need some depth there, and there's going to be some questions that are answered, especially when spring ball rolls around. Who's going to be even throwing them the passes? But Jaden Greathouse, in my opinion, has been a long time coming, and he was able to finally break through towards the end of last year. He didn't have a single 100-yard performance through his first 2 seasons, and then he topped that mark in back-to-back games down the stretch, and that was right before the national championship game. And I just felt like he was the guy that we could rely on late in the season. And it's unfortunate that him and Riley Leonard weren't able to get that connection built until, obviously, Riley Leonard's now on his way to the NFL. Now, through Notre Dame's first 14 games of the season, he had just 29 catches for 359 yards and a single touchdown. But in Notre Dame's last 2 games, he hauled in 13 for 233 and 3 touchdowns. He led the Irish with the lowest drop percentage on the team all year at 2.8%. He had just 1 drop all season long. This is a guy who I think can be extremely reliable and a very reliable target to whoever ends up being the quarterback, whether or not that's Steve Angeli or CJ Carr. I think Jaden Greathouse, they brought in 3 transfer wide receivers last year, and he was still technically slotted to be the number 1 guy. They're continuing to add depth. I think he's going to continue to be another really, really good option for whoever it is who's throwing the ball. He's one of the top returners, but I like this wide receiving core for Notre Dame. I don't think it's going to be as big of a weakness as people potentially think. I think they got some great guys coming back. Now we're going to move to the offensive line. Billy Schrauth battled through a high ankle sprain for the majority of this past season, but he still performed at a high level. Okay, according to Pro Football Focus, he's still graded out as Notre Dame's best pass blocker. We're going to be able to bring him back. We saw some of those guys after the national championship game jump into the portal. He was not one of them. Okay, graded out, as I mentioned, best pass blocker for Notre Dame. They keep him. He's on the second team for ESPN's way too early All-American squad, so he's joining a couple of the guys that I mentioned prior. And presumably, they're going to be betting on him to be that physical interior offensive lineman that can, when he is healthy, just dominate. And he's going to lead this dominant Notre Dame offensive line. I mean, it's been kind of like offensive line U for the last, handful of years. I think that he will continue to do that. That's going to be my pick on this offensive line, but there were plenty of other guys to pick from. And I didn't want to cop out and just pick the entire offensive line, because coming up, I chose all of those young guys on the defensive line. I made a video talking about we need some more defensive line depth, or some proven guys to start for the defensive line. But the guys that we have in-house and that we're going to potentially be bringing back are really, really dominant. Donovan Hennish, Bryce Young. I mean, these guys put in some real time in the game down the stretch as the year went on, when it was next man up. I like the depth, and I like the returners on this defensive line. Yes, same as the wide receiving core that we have. We're going to need more guys to step up. We're going to need that upper echelon of starter. We're going to need somebody who can definitely be reliable, but we got those guys in the defensive line. So I'm looking at this roster. You might be thinking, well, top to bottom, we got some great returners all around. Yes, but that leads me into potentially what might be the next video, and that is talking about the quarterbacks. I think CJ Carr can be great. I think Steve Angeli can be great. We saw him in the playoff against Penn State, but that is going to be the biggest question. That is going to be where most of these other players are going to rely on, that quarterback play. Can we get something that's just as good as Riley Leonard, potentially better, especially in the pass game? So that's what I'm going to be touching on next video. We're going to be talking about this upcoming duel that we could potentially have as far as the quarterbacks are concerned. We haven't had a true quarterback competition, true one, in a while, so it should be fun and interesting to watch. But thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. Always great talking Notre Dame football. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below about the returning starters, and we'll see you guys next time.